Hi, my name is Aaron Pedinati, and today I am interviewing Todd Fabozzi at the Mouzon House. Todd is an urban planner with 20 years of experience. He began his career at the Montgomery County Department of Economic Development and Planning, where he worked for 2.5 years. For the past 18 years, he has worked for the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, of which he is currently the program director. But today he is speaking in his capacity as a private citizen with an informed opinion. The focus of Todd's planning experience has been regional growth analysis. His work has dealt with issues of smart growth, water quality, climate change planning, and the development and utilization of geographic information systems technology. He has made nearly 200 presentations on regional growth patterns and participated on nearly 50 local and regional plans. At the level of his professional orientation, Todd's approach to planning has been influenced by the movement known as the New Urbanism. Inspired by Jane Jacobs' classic book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, this movement advocates for the cultivation of mixed-use neighborhoods in which the proximity of businesses, residences, and civic structures to each other encourages pedestrian traffic and social interaction. It stresses the need for the intelligent placement of buildings, roads, and civic works in order to promote the creation of safe, walkable, and visually interesting public spaces. Todd currently lives in Saratoga Springs, New York. Due to his decades of experience as a planner, he struck me as a good person to consult about the Saratoga Springs City Center's proposed plan to build a 5-story paid parking garage in the parking lot outside the Mouzon House. Todd, thank you for taking the time to be interviewed today. We really appreciate the opportunity to hear your perspective on this proposed plan. To start out, I want to ask whether, in your capacity as an urban planner, you think that the city center's design for this garage is an example of good urban planning or poorly executed urban planning. And please explain your reasons for your view.
Okay, well, first of all, Aaron, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure.
I've been following this issue in the newspapers. I haven't seen the detailed plans, although I've seen some conceptual drawings of this design. I'm not sure I would call it urban planning at all. I think it is a private real estate deal, although it involves public-owned land. So it's a complicated kind of proposal because it opens up a dialogue beyond just simply looking at a parking garage that somebody proposes. So the design that I've seen and the use of this land, my opinion is no, it is not the right use of this particular part of the city. And the particular plan in and of itself is much too out of scale for this spot. It incorporates a number of aspects of development that have been debunked over the years. You make reference to Jane Jacobs. You know, if you read that book, there are references in that book to things like border vacuums, blank walls, the kind of things that basically make an urban environment less pedestrian friendly. And it would seem to me that this proposal fails on those two fronts. It is incorporating, a skyway that's also been debunked, and there are numerous cities throughout the country who tried that approach, particularly cities that were looking to shield the pedestrian from the weather, the elements. However, it turned out that those places removed pedestrians from the street, and that pedestrians on the street are really what makes a city feel alive. So, in my opinion, this particular proposal is opening up, or should be opening up, a dialogue about urban planning here in Saratoga Springs, and not just about a parking garage. Because there's a few other elements at play here that need to be thought about when you talk about what to do with a piece of property in a prime spot like this that the city itself owns. And first of all, is parking an issue? That seems to be one of those things that's a given if you talk to people, say, that don't live in the city. Most people that live in the city, I don't think, say that unless you own a business up on Broadway and somehow you expect, the customers expect, to be able to pull up in front of the building and park. which is a suburban way of dealing with growth, right? And even then, when you pull up in the front of the mall, you usually are quite a ways out on that parking lot and have quite a walk, over a desolate parking lot to get to your destination within the mall. But a city doesn't function best in that way, and we have all kinds of evidence from years of bad planning in the United States where city after city was wrecked trying to make a city act like a suburb, trying to provide parking and allow people who didn't live in that city to potentially easily come into the city, park their car, do their business, and get out. And what ended up happening is lots of historic buildings were removed, the pedestrian environment was degraded. You put a lot of excess parking in these cities. I grew up in a city of Amsterdam near here where the downtown was destroyed by putting a shopping mall right in the middle of Main Street with a big parking garage that now sits mostly empty. We were out at a conference in Buffalo not long ago and I say we, the people that I'm involved with on the Congress for New Urbanism, and Buffalo is a perfect example of a city where the fabric was torn apart trying to make the city act like suburbia or compete with suburbia on suburbia's terms, which are what? Highway interchanges, auto-oriented design, and plenty of parking. That's not why people come here. People come here because of the walkable environment and the human scale of this city. And if we start to act like a suburb with parking being the main driver, we're really failing in understanding what makes this city tick. So people who expect, and this is one of the things I think that we have to think about here is, the expectations of the people who come into this city who don't live here and say parking is a problem. So I read a letter to the editor on this issue in the local paper from the owners of the bookstore. And they said their number one thing they hear from people who come into their store is there's not enough parking. And I find that to be a really interesting kind of statement, because the number one reason people go to that store is because it's on Broadway, where there isn't any surface parking really, and if there was a lot of surface parking, it would be a detriment, and in fact the building they're in is an infill of surface parking that now has enhanced that part of the city. And so the issue with parking, I think, is that the suburban mindset expects you to be able to pull up in front of your building. I've lived in this city for 8 years, and I've never had any problems with parking in this city. First of all, I don't pull up on Broadway and expect to park in front of the building that I'm going to go to. I have no problem parking several blocks away on purpose and just simply walking. And that's what I think if we start to create a culture of that, which we do have here, of people coming here to walk and enjoy the environment. I mean, people aren't coming up, from Clifton Park to park up here and walk around for any other reason that they can't walk around in Clifton Park. And that's just one community. Why do people come to Saratoga? Because it's not like Clifton Park, or it's not like Wilton. If people want parking in front of the building they're going to, they can go up to Route 50 in Wilton and they can pull in front of the Target or the Walmart. So, I think this opens up a conversation about not only walkable cities versus parking in cars, but also a conversation about public space and how do we enhance public space in this city. And I've got some ideas to talk about on that, but that was only one question, and I'm kind of going on. So maybe you got another question, and I'll come back around to some of these ideas about public space. And I've got a few more things to say about parking.
Well, no, that was a very articulate answer and a great answer, and I just wanted to sort of reiterate a point that you made when you were starting out, which is basically this is not urban planning at all. This is just the suburbanization of Saratoga Springs, a sort of parking-oriented, automotively oriented answer to a question that we haven't even really discussed in the first place at this point, like right. at the level of planning.
But here's something else about urban planning, though. This city is doing a comprehensive plan. It's taken a long time to do it. I don't believe it's done, or at least I haven't heard that it's done. So, what's the stance about walkability and parking in the plan? And not only that, but the city has gotten a grant to do a sustainability implementation plan, which means, dealing with issues of climate change and things of that nature, which mean less auto-oriented growth. So we can cut down on carbon dioxide emissions and more walkable, kinds of experiences, which means, for example, being able to take public transit. I live off of Lake Avenue and I take the bus down here all the time because there happens to be a bus that just goes up and down this street. So there are plenty of times where I don't even bother to drive down here. But the other thing is the city has also gotten a grant, and they haven't started this project yet, through the Capital District Transportation Committee to do a pedestrian and bike linkage plan, which is also where this dialogue should start to play out. So it seems to me that, there's a couple plans in the hopper here that are not completed, some haven't even begun yet, that are all on this issue of walkability, and I would presume that one of the key outcomes of these kind of plans, given that they're focused on walking and biking and sustainability, is to advocate for less auto-oriented kinds of growth. So, when we talk about urban planning in this city, we should use the mechanism of these upcoming plans to be able to flesh out this issue in a truly public way. And so at minimum, I would think that this plan should be on hold until those processes run their course.
Right.
And that we get a lot more public input on these other plans, and then see where a parking garage shakes out.
To be honest, I have found it sort of surreal to be a grad student working part-time at my parents' restaurant, putting together interviews with urban planners in order to discuss this project, because it seems like that's an initiative that the city itself should have been pursuing when they were first concerning themselves with this plan. Along the lines of what you were saying before, I did want to ask what you thought this parcel of space, which is, again, I've mentioned this in other interviews and other comments that I've said on YouTube, something that is the last parcel of publicly owned, city-owned space in downtown Saratoga Springs. It's incredibly valuable real estate. And it's also like one of the last places in which a significant extension of something like, the downtown area can actually occur. So what do you think could be done with that space as opposed to just building a parking garage on it? Like some of your ideas for what could actually happen there.
Well, I think it's a perfect spot to fill in the urban fabric. Now that's happened across the street here. So you've got the big proposal, the big development across the street with the hotel and with the condos. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a missing tooth, several missing teeth. Quite frankly, it's a big piece all the way out to Lake Avenue that could be filled in with urban buildings, mixed-use urban buildings, but not necessarily to fill in the whole spot all the way through. Because the other thing that this city should be focusing on is enhancing public space. And by public space, I'm talking about the streets, the parks, the potential plazas that are accessible to anybody without necessarily having to go spend money. Now, I know everything is always, phrased in the way of consumers coming to the city to spend money, and that's fine. People do that anyway. And one of the best ways to get them to spend money is to keep them coming back, let them have a good time while they're here, and get them to hang out a little bit as well. So if you look at this city, where can you hang out without being on private property? Well, in the downtown area, there's really two places. There's the street itself, and so the city has put benches along Broadway. That's okay, but there's not enough of them. What cities are doing in San Francisco and other places in New York is they're creating informal places where they're putting out chairs. Look at Broadway in New York City. They closed down part of the street and they just put chairs out, and all of a sudden everyone was hanging out and sitting around and just enjoying the atmosphere, and they're lingering, and they're spending money too. So that particular piece of real estate isn't turning over dollars, but the real estate all around it is.
Right.
And we don't really have enough of that. So that, to me, is something the comp plan, and I've already made this point to the people working on the comp plan, should be focusing on. Where can we have some more informal seating in this city, particularly during the summer, where there's just not enough benches? And those are low-cost kinds of things. Get people to hang out and not just walk by. But the other way you do that is by creating urban plazas.